Welcome to The Explainer. All right, today we're diving into the really complex, often confusing story of the United States and its role in the global fight against climate change. Let's get right into it. So, let's just start with a number. $3 trillion. Yep, you heard that right. That is the mind-boggling inflation-adjusted cost of all the weather and climate disasters that have slammed the United States since just 1980. That number alone really sets the stage for the enormous challenge we're talking about.
Okay, so to really get a handle on the political tug-of-war over how to stop those costs from getting even worse, we have to go back and look at the huge global agreement that's at the very center of this whole debate.
So, what is the Paris Agreement really? Well, at its heart, it's a global promise. A pact with a really clear, you might even say audacious goal. Keep the planet from warming up more than 2 degrees Celsius, and try like heck to keep it to 1.5 degrees, to avoid the absolute worst, most catastrophic impacts of climate change. But here's the thing that makes it, well, complicated. It's super flexible. Instead of some big top-down command for every country, each nation gets to set its own targets. They're called Nationally Determined Contributions, or NDCs for short. Now, this is great because it allows for plans that fit each country. But it also creates this global patchwork of commitments with, let's just say, wildly different levels of ambition. And this is where the main drama of our story really kicks in. The United States' incredibly volatile on-again, off-again relationship with this whole global plan.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It's enough to give you whiplash. The U.S. jumps in back in 2016. Then in 2020, under President Trump, it's out. President Biden brings it back in 2021. And now it's facing a potential second withdrawal in 2026. This dizzying back and forth has sent these massive shockwaves of uncertainty all across the globe. And here is the real kicker. According to the Congressional Research Service, this cycle of joining, leaving, rejoining, it makes the United States a total global anomaly. It is the only nation on Earth to have repeatedly done a U-turn on its commitment to the agreement. But this policy whiplash isn't happening in some kind of bubble. It's all playing out against the backdrop of this fierce geopolitical and economic rivalry with China. And that rivalry is completely reshaping the global race to a green economy. This slide really gets to the heart of it. You've got two totally different game plans. On one side, there's the US, which is increasingly leaned into an America-first protectionist strategy, while also pushing for what it calls energy dominance in fossil fuels. And on the other side, you've got China, which has been pouring state money into completely dominating the green tech supply chain, with a laser focus on what it calls the new three: solar, batteries, and electric vehicles.
And wow, just look at the result of China's strategy. It is absolutely stunning. As you can see, China has a near-total monopoly on solar manufacturing. We're talking over 90% of the global market. The International Energy Agency is basically warning that for the next few years, the entire world is going to be almost completely dependent on China for the basic building blocks of solar panels.
So how did the US respond? With a massive wall of tariffs. I mean, look at these numbers. A staggering 100% on Chinese electric vehicles, 50% on their solar cells, and 25% on EV batteries. This is basically a direct assault on the very technologies at the heart of the green transition.
But hold on, because the story doesn't end with the federal government. That first withdrawal announcement under President Trump, it actually lit a fire under a powerful countermovement from a source you might not expect: the states themselves. So back in 2017, a bipartisan group of governors got together and formed the US Climate Alliance. And get this, today, the states in this alliance represent a whopping 60% of the entire US economy. That is huge. So what does this actually mean? Well, it means that even as Washington, D.C. is slamming on the brakes, you've got governors representing over half the US population hitting the accelerator. They're setting their own aggressive emissions targets, and they're even reporting their progress directly to the UN. They've essentially created a whole parallel track for US climate action. And they are not being shy about it at all. In a direct message sent straight to the UN, the Alliance co-chairs made a really bold declaration. They said, look, we will continue America's work to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement with or without the federal government. So, where does all this leave us? Well, you've got this fractured landscape of federal retreat, this intense geopolitical rivalry, and this state-level rebellion. And it's created this tangled, messy web of complex and, frankly, often unintended consequences for the planet.
And here is the great irony in all of this. The very trade policies that are designed to protect American industries could actually backfire when it comes to the climate. By disrupting global markets, they can push production to countries with weaker environmental rules. You're not actually stopping the pollution, you're just exporting it somewhere else.
And the potential numbers here are just staggering. One study modeled what might happen in a full-blown trade war, and the result was shocking. Sure, emissions from factories might dip by a tiny fraction, but emissions from land use changes, things like farmers clearing forests to plant new crops to replace imports, that could skyrocket by over 17%.
Which leaves us with the billion-dollar question, doesn't it? In a world that feels so full of rivalry and division, can we still actually come together to solve our most existential threat, or are we just destined to fight over the scraps of a burning planet? That's the crossroads we're at today.